I remember the night clearly. Liam was pacing in our cramped living room, his eyes alight with a fire I couldn't understand. He was talking about this crazy idea of his, starting his own creative business, something he called a dream worth chasing. I sat on the couch, arms crossed, watching him like he was entertaining some childish fantasy. To me, it was just another one of his impractical schemes that would fizzle out under the weight of reality. "Emma, this could be huge," he said, voice trembling with excitement, clutching a stack of sketches and business plans. "I want to build something that's mine. Something that makes a difference." I laughed, soft, dismissive, but sharp. "Liam, you're dreaming again. You don't have the experience or the connections. Why waste your energy on something so unstable?" He frowned, but didn't argue. Instead, he kept explaining, his words tumbling over each other as he painted vivid pictures of the future, clients lining up, creative projects that mattered, a life fueled by passion instead of paycheck-to-paycheck survival. But I saw none of that. All I saw was risk, uncertainty, and the possibility of failure. Our friends were gathered nearby, half listening, half smirking at the back and forth. Julian, our mutual friend and the eternal skeptic, chuckled under his breath. "Emma's right, Liam. It's a nice idea, but it's not exactly practical, is it?" I felt a flush of vindication. Julian's approval was a silent nod to my realism, and I soaked in it. Liam's dreams were just that, dreams. Not something to be taken seriously. The conversation wound down, but the tension lingered in the room like a thick fog. Over the next few weeks, Liam's enthusiasm didn't wane, but my patience did. Every time he brought up a new idea or shared a promising lead, I found myself rolling my eyes or making sarcastic remarks. "Sure, Liam, maybe next you'll tell me you're going to invent a teleportation device." He tried to laugh it off, but I caught the flicker of hurt in his eyes more than once. I told myself he was being overly sensitive, that he needed to toughen up if he was going to survive the real world. Supporting him wasn't my job. If anything, I thought I was doing him a favor by keeping him grounded. Our circle of friends began to notice the shift between us. At gatherings, I would tease Liam about his wild ambitions, and sometimes he'd smile, but other times the smile felt forced, like a mask hiding disappointment. Friends like Sarah and Mike exchanged glances, unspoken questions hanging between them. I didn't care. I was convinced I was just being honest, trying to protect him from himself. One night, after a dinner with friends, Liam and I ended up alone on the couch. He was quieter than usual, fiddling with his phone. I broke the silence, unable to resist. "Why do you keep chasing this pipe dream, Liam? You're talented, sure, but there's a difference between talent and success. You need stability." He looked up, eyes steady. "I'm not chasing a pipe dream. This is what I want, Emma. I want to build something that lasts. I want to prove to myself that I can do it." I scoffed softly. "And what if you fail? What then? Will you come crawling back because you realized I was right all along?" His jaw tightened. "No, I won't. I have to try." That night, I lay awake, turning his words over in my mind. I told myself I was being practical. I was protecting us both from disappointment. But beneath that conviction was a gnawing discomfort I refused to acknowledge. In the days that followed, Liam started spending more time away from our apartment, working late at a co-working space, meeting potential clients, sketching plans in cafes. I noticed how his eyes sparkled when he talked about new possibilities. It was contagious, even if I didn't want to admit it. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of him on a video call, animated and passionate. I felt a pang of something unfamiliar. Was it envy? Admiration? Something bitter and sharp. I shook it off and told myself to focus on my job, my own life. Still, the moments when Liam's dreams flared up, they felt like tiny cracks in the foundation of our life together. They made me uncomfortable because they hinted at a future that didn't include me in the way I wanted. I wanted to be the one he confided in, the one who believed in him. But instead, I was the skeptic, the voice of doubt. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, I found myself mocking him in front of Sarah and Mike. "So, Liam, when are you going to make your first million? Should I start calling you CEO yet?" The table erupted in laughter, but Liam's smile was tight. Later, when we were alone, he said quietly, "Emma, I wish you'd take me seriously." "I am serious," I replied, frustration bubbling up. "I just don't want you to waste your time on something that won't work." He didn't answer. Instead, he looked away, a shadow crossing his face. That night, I lay awake again, feeling the weight of the distance growing between us. Liam's dreams were expanding, but I was shrinking into skepticism. I wanted to believe in him, but I couldn't make myself cross that line. The more he talked about the future, the more I felt like an obstacle standing in his way. I told myself that love meant honesty, even if it hurt. But deep down, I wondered if I was just afraid that if he succeeded, our relationship would change, and maybe not in ways I could handle. As the weeks passed, Liam's plans became more detailed. He talked about quitting his job, investing savings, building a team. I listened, offering half-hearted encouragement at best. I didn't realize then how much those small dismissals piled up, how each joke, each sarcastic comment chipped away at his confidence. One afternoon, I found him staring out the window, distant and quiet. I asked if he was okay. He smiled faintly and said, "I'm just thinking." "About what?" "About what it means to have someone believe in you." I didn't know what to say. I felt a lump in my throat, a sudden awareness that I was failing him in a way that couldn't be fixed with words. That night, I lay in bed, replaying our conversations, my laughter, my dismissals. I wasn't proud of how I'd treated his dreams. But I convinced myself that I was only trying to keep us grounded, to save us both from disappointment. Still, in the quiet moments before sleep, a whisper of doubt crept in. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Liam's dreams were worth more than my cynicism. But it was easier to push that thought away. For now, I stayed in the role I'd chosen, the skeptic, the realist. And Liam remained the dreamer, chasing a future I couldn't yet see, leaving me to wonder if I'd soon be left behind. The tension between us had been simmering quietly, but that evening, it finally boiled over. Liam stood in the doorway of our apartment, his eyes sharp and resolute, clutching a worn leather portfolio filled with his plans. The air between us was thick, heavy with unspoken frustrations. "I've been thinking," he began, voice steady but firm. "I can't keep doing this, pretending my dreams don't matter to you." I bristled, defensive before he could finish. "I've been honest with you, Liam. I just don't want you to get hurt chasing something unrealistic." He shook his head slowly, disappointment shadowing his features. "It's not just about me anymore. It's about what I believe in, about building something that means something. I need support, not skepticism." I opened my mouth to argue, but he cut me off. "I'm going to pursue this on my own. I need to prove to myself that I can do it, even if you don't believe in me." The words hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to reach out, to pull him back, but instead, I felt myself shrinking, retreating behind a wall of disbelief. "You're serious?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. "I've already found a small studio. I start next week." The room felt suddenly smaller, colder. Our shared dreams, once tangled and intertwined, now felt like separate threads unraveling. I wanted to say so many things, how wrong this was, how foolish, but the words caught in my throat. In the days that followed, Liam's resolve only hardened. I watched him pack his belongings with a mix of disbelief and something close to fear. The apartment, once filled with laughter and shared plans, echoed with silence and absence. When he moved out, it was as if a part of my world had been ripped away. The space where his things had been felt hollow, and every corner reminded me of what we had lost. I tried to convince myself it was for the best, that he needed this to grow, but the ache in my chest told a different story. Our conversations became strained, clipped. I called him more out of habit than hope, and his responses were polite but distant. I sensed the growing chasm between us, widening with each passing day. One evening, I found myself standing outside his new studio, hesitant. The thought of knocking felt both urgent and terrifying. What would I say? How could I apologize for not believing in him? Instead, I lingered in the shadows, watching through the window as he worked late into the night. His focus was unyielding, his passion palpable. For the first time, I saw the man I loved not as a dreamer, but as a creator. The realization hit me like a wave: he was becoming someone new, someone I didn't know how to reach anymore. I remember the call he made a week after moving out. His voice was quieter, softer, but firm. "Emma, I need you to understand that this is something I have to do alone. It's not about us anymore." The finality in his tone stung. I wanted to argue, to beg for a chance to support him, but I knew it was useless. He had made his choice, and I had to accept it, even if it meant watching him slip away. In the solitude of our empty apartment, I wrestled with my own reflection. Was I really the person who couldn't believe in him? Had my doubts and jokes driven him away? The thought was unbearable, but I couldn't deny the truth. I tried to remind myself that love wasn't about holding someone back, even if it meant letting go. But the nights were long, and the silence louder than ever. As Liam built his new life piece by piece, I found myself standing at the crossroads of regret and hope. I wanted to believe that someday, somehow, we could find our way back. But for now, I was left with the stark reality of his absence and the weight of my own disbelief. The apartment felt emptier than ever. Liam's absence stretched out like a shadow I couldn't shake. Each morning, I woke up to the silence that used to be filled with his voice, his laughter, the comforting noise of two lives entwined. Instead, there was only the soft hum of the city outside and the distant memories of what we once had. I found myself reaching for the phone half a dozen times a day, tempted to call him, to hear his voice, but always stopping myself. The last conversations between us had been cold, clipped, filled with the weight of things left unsaid. I wasn't sure if I belonged in his new world, or if I was just a ghost haunting the edges of his dreams. Meanwhile, Liam threw himself completely into his work. I heard through the grapevine, mutual friends, social media whispers, that his small studio was buzzing with activity. He was meeting clients, pitching ideas, and slowly building his vision from the ground up. The passion I once saw flicker in his eyes was now a steady flame, burning brighter with every passing day. I watched from a distance, a spectator to his transformation. His social media posts were filled with snapshots of brainstorming sessions, sketches, and smiling faces, people who believed in him, who saw what I had failed to see. The contrast between his rising momentum and my stagnant routine was impossible to ignore. Sometimes, late at night, I would scroll through his updates, feeling a strange mix of pride and envy. Pride that he was making something of himself, envy that I wasn't part of it. It was a bitter pill to swallow, realizing that his success was unfolding without me. At gatherings with friends, I noticed how Liam's new circle of supporters admired his drive and creativity. They spoke of him with respect and excitement, while I felt increasingly isolated, clinging to the fragments of our past. I was the skeptic, the one who had doubted, and now I stood outside looking in. One evening, I found myself at a small cafe where Liam often worked. I sat in the corner, nursing a coffee, watching as he animatedly discussed plans with a group of young creatives. The passion in his voice was unmistakable, the light in his eyes undeniable. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine what it would be like to be part of that world, to share in the triumphs and struggles, to be the one cheering him on instead of standing in the way. But the walls I had built around myself felt too thick to tear down. The distance between us wasn't just physical, it had become emotional, a chasm of misunderstanding and regret. Whenever I tried to reach out, the words felt hollow, unable to bridge the gap that had formed. I caught myself replaying our last arguments, the sarcastic comments I had made, the dismissive laughter that once seemed harmless. Each memory was a jagged edge, a reminder of how I had contributed to the fracture. One afternoon, I received a message from Liam. It was brief, polite, but tinged with an unspoken sadness. "Hope you're doing well. I'm focused on the new project. Maybe we can talk sometime." My heart ached at the cautious hope behind those words. I wanted to respond, to say that I was sorry, that I believed in him now. But fear held me back, the fear that the wounds were too deep, that the gap between us was too wide to cross. Instead, I stared at the screen, the message glowing softly in the dim light. I realized how much I was losing by standing on the sidelines, how much of him was slipping away with every passing day. The weeks turned into months. Liam's business gained traction, his name becoming known in circles I had never been part of. I read articles featuring his work, listened to podcasts where he spoke with conviction. He was becoming the person he had always wanted to be. And I was still here, caught in a web of regret and what-ifs. Sometimes, I wondered if I had been the one holding him back all along, if my cynicism had dimmed his light. The thought was unbearable, but it forced me to confront the truth, that support and belief are the foundation upon which dreams are built. But by then, the distance was no longer something that could be easily crossed. Liam was moving forward, building a life that didn't need me. And I was left to watch, silently, as the man I loved became someone new, someone I barely recognized anymore. Liam's world was expanding beyond the small studio where he had started, and the ripple of his success began to reach places I hadn't expected. His business was no longer a whispered hope or a fledgling experiment, it was real, tangible, and gaining momentum. I first noticed it during a casual brunch with friends. Sarah pulled out her phone, eyes shining with excitement. "Have you seen Liam's latest project? It's all over social media, people are talking about it." I nodded, forcing a smile. I had seen the posts, the glowing reviews, the invitations to industry events. But hearing it spoken aloud, the pride in Sarah's voice, made the reality hit harder. Liam wasn't just succeeding, he was thriving. Later that day, I found myself scrolling through the comments on one of his project pages. Praise poured in from clients and colleagues alike, celebrating his creativity and vision. The words stung, not because I doubted their truth, but because I had been the one who once mocked his ambitions. A bruised kind of pride settled in my chest, mingling with a gnawing sense of loss. Liam's rise illuminated the distance between us, not just physical or emotional, but a divide carved by my own doubts and dismissals. The following weeks brought invitations to gallery openings, networking events, and collaborative projects. Liam's name was becoming synonymous with innovation and passion, and his circle of supporters grew steadily. They were people who saw his potential and nurtured it, people I didn't know how to be. At one such event, I arrived unannounced, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man I once knew. The room buzzed with conversation, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Liam stood at the center, animated and confident, surrounded by colleagues who hung on his every word. His eyes met mine briefly across the crowd, a flicker of recognition, perhaps tinged with surprise. But he didn't come over. Instead, he turned back to his new world, leaving me to navigate the unfamiliar space alone. I wandered among the guests, feeling like an outsider in a world that had moved on without me. The pride I felt for Liam's success was tempered by the aching realization that I was no longer part of his story. That night, as I lay awake, I thought about the conversations we'd had, the jokes I'd made, the skepticism I'd worn like armor. I saw now how those moments might have wounded him, how my lack of support had sown seeds of doubt in his heart. I wanted to reach out, to say I was sorry, to tell him I believed in him now. But the words felt heavy, tangled in the fear of rejection and the weight of past mistakes. In the following days, I noticed how Liam's new life contrasted sharply with mine. While he moved forward with purpose, I clung to memories and regrets, trapped in a cycle of self-recrimination. Our mutual friends acted as silent witnesses to the widening gap. Some tried to mediate, others avoided the topic altogether. The unspoken truth was clear: Liam had changed, and so had I. One afternoon, I received an unexpected invitation to a showcase of his latest work. It was a chance to see firsthand the fruits of his labor, to witness the passion that had once filled our shared space. I hesitated but accepted, hoping to find a connection, a spark of the man I loved beneath the layers of success. The gallery was sleek and modern, filled with vibrant colors and bold designs. Liam's pieces commanded attention, each one a testament to his vision and dedication. As I moved through the exhibit, I felt a complex mix of emotions, admiration, envy, and a profound sadness. The man who had once shared his dreams with me was now a stranger, his world illuminated by a light I couldn't reach. At the reception, I caught sight of Liam again. He greeted admirers with warmth and confidence, his smile genuine but distant. When our eyes met, there was a flicker of something, recognition, regret, or perhaps a silent apology, but he didn't approach. Leaving the gallery, I felt the weight of my own isolation. Liam's transformation was inspiring, but it also underscored the cost of my earlier disbelief. That night, I sat alone, grappling with the realization that my role in his journey had shifted from partner to observer. The pride I felt was tinged with pain, a reminder that sometimes success comes with the price of lost connections. I knew I had to confront my own failings, to understand how my doubts had shaped the path we were now on. But the path forward was uncertain, and the distance between us seemed to stretch further with every step Liam took toward his dreams. I still remember the day I decided to reach out to Liam, to bridge the gulf that had swallowed us whole. It wasn't a grand gesture. No dramatic declarations or sweeping apologies. Just a simple message, typed with trembling fingers, sent into the digital void. "Can we talk?" The reply came quicker than I expected. "We can try," he wrote. That small opening was enough to ignite a flicker of hope, fragile but real. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe, a neutral ground far from the bustling events where our worlds had once collided and now, somehow, diverged. I arrived early, nerves coiling tight in my stomach as I watched the door. When Liam walked in, there was a cautiousness in his eyes, a guardedness I hadn't seen before. He smiled politely but didn't reach out to hold my hand as he used to. The distance between us was tangible. We ordered coffee, the silence stretching before one of us finally spoke. "I've thought a lot about what happened," I began, voice soft. "I realize now how much I hurt you, how my doubts chipped away at your confidence. I'm sorry, Liam. I should have believed in you." He nodded slowly, his gaze steady. "Thank you for saying that. It meant a lot to hear." But then his expression shifted, a shadow passing over his features. "Emma, it wasn't just about believing in me. When you mocked my dreams, it made me question everything, whether I was enough, whether I deserved to chase what I wanted." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of pain and disappointment. The wounds ran deeper than I had imagined. "I know," I whispered. "I wish I could go back and change everything, but all I can do now is try to be better." He looked down, fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "It's hard to just pick up where we left off. The distance isn't just physical, it's in the trust, the understanding. I don't know if I can just erase that." The honesty in his voice was both heartbreaking and necessary. I realized then that forgiveness wasn't a neat package I could wrap and hand over. It was messy, complicated, and fragile. We talked for hours, about the past, about the present, about the dreams that had pulled us apart. Liam shared his journey, the challenges and triumphs, the moments when he almost gave up but didn't. I listened, humbled by his resilience. I shared my regrets, my fears, the loneliness I'd felt watching him grow without me. It was a conversation filled with pauses and awkward silences, but also with glimpses of understanding. Yet, despite the tentative connection rekindled that day, I sensed the unspoken truth lurking beneath our words. Some things couldn't be undone overnight. In the days that followed, I tried reaching out more, texts, calls, small gestures to show I was there. Sometimes he responded warmly, other times the silence was deafening. Friends noticed the change in me. Sarah pulled me aside one afternoon. "Be careful, Emma. Liam's trying, but he's also protecting himself. You can't rush this." I nodded, grateful for the warning but desperate to believe that time would heal the wounds. One evening, after a particularly strained phone call, Liam said quietly, "I'm not sure if I'm ready to let you back in all the way. I need to keep moving forward, and sometimes that means walking alone." His words pierced me, a reminder that his path was no longer tied to mine in the way it once had been. I sat alone that night, grappling with the realization that love sometimes means accepting distance, respecting boundaries, and understanding that the past can't always be rewritten. Our fragile attempts at reconciliation were a dance on a tightrope, balancing hope and caution, forgiveness and self-preservation. I wanted to hold on to the possibility of us, but I had to be honest with myself. Liam's journey was his own, and my role had changed. The emotional divide between us remained, a silent barrier that neither of us was yet ready to cross fully. And so, I learned to live with the bittersweet truth that sometimes, even love isn't enough to bridge the gaps forged by hurt and doubt. The headlines caught me by surprise one morning as I scrolled through my news feed. Liam's creative venture takes off, a rising star in the design world. The article was glowing, filled with praise for his innovative approach and the rapid growth of his business. I sat frozen, the words blurring as a mix of pride and regret washed over me. Liam's success was no longer a distant rumor whispered among friends or a hopeful update on social media. It had become undeniable, concrete, and celebrated by people I didn't know but who admired him nonetheless. The thought struck me sharply: this was the man I had once mocked, the dreamer I had doubted, now standing tall in a world I could barely glimpse. I found myself following his journey with a complicated blend of emotions. Every new project, every media mention, was a reminder of what I had lost and what I had failed to nurture. Yet, beneath the sting of regret was a flicker of admiration. He had built this from nothing, despite my skepticism. Friends often mentioned his name in conversation, their tones respectful and impressed. Mike told me about a recent collaboration Liam had secured with a major client, while Sarah shared stories of his growing influence in the creative community. Their excitement was genuine, but it only underscored my own feelings of distance. I tried to celebrate his achievements from afar, but it wasn't easy. There was a hollow space inside where our shared dreams used to live, now filled with memories of missed chances and harsh words. One evening, I attended a party where Liam was the guest of honor. The room buzzed with energy, filled with industry insiders and admirers. As I watched him mingle, confident and radiant, I felt like a spectator in his life rather than a participant. He caught my eye briefly across the room, a nod, a quiet smile, but the gap between us was undeniable. He belonged here now, surrounded by people who championed his vision, while I remained on the periphery. Later, I overheard conversations praising his resilience and creativity, the very qualities I had once belittled. It was a bitter pill to swallow, knowing my doubts had once threatened to extinguish that spark. In the solitude of my apartment, I grappled with the truth that Liam's independence was both his strength and the wedge between us. He had forged ahead without me, and while a part of me longed to be part of that journey, I understood that his path was his own. I thought back to the moments when I had laughed at his dreams, dismissed his ideas, and failed to offer the support he needed. Those memories weighed heavily, a reminder that success is often built on the foundation of encouragement and belief. Despite everything, I found myself rooting for him, hoping that his triumphs would bring him happiness and fulfillment. But I also realized that my role was no longer in the spotlight of his life. In quiet moments, I imagined what it might have been like if I had stood by him from the start, how different the story could have been. Yet, those thoughts only deepened the ache of what was lost. Liam's rising star was a testament to his talent and determination, shining brightly even in the absence of my support. It was a lesson I carried with me, a painful but necessary truth about the cost of doubt and the power of perseverance. As the months passed, I learned to accept that his success was not a reflection of my failure but a celebration of his resilience. And though our paths had diverged, the impact of his journey left an indelible mark on my own. I found myself alone one rainy afternoon, the kind of day that presses in with gray skies and endless quiet, leaving space for memories to flood in unbidden. I sat by the window, watching droplets race down the glass, and the past came rushing back, moments I had tried to bury beneath layers of pride and excuses. I remembered the first time Liam shared his dream with me, eyes bright with possibility. I had laughed then, not out of malice but out of disbelief, unable to see the world through his hopeful lens. "You're dreaming," I'd said, voice dripping with skepticism. In that instant, I had dismissed not just his ambition but a piece of him. The memory stung, sharper than I expected. I saw now how those words, casual and careless, had chipped away at the foundation of his confidence. Each joke, every sarcastic remark, was a small fracture in the trust between us. I thought back to the times I rolled my eyes when he spoke of clients and business plans, the way I minimized his passion as impractical. I had told myself I was being realistic, protecting us both from inevitable disappointment. But in truth, I was afraid that his dreams would pull him away from me, that the future he envisioned didn't include us. Flashbacks played like a film in my mind, the dinner parties where I teased him in front of friends, his forced smiles that didn't quite reach his eyes, the late-night conversations where I dismissed his ideas with a laugh, the growing silence that followed, heavy with unspoken hurt. I realized how often I had been the obstacle in his path, the voice that whispered doubt when he needed encouragement. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was necessary. Love, I understood now, isn't just about honesty, it's about belief, support, and sometimes sacrifice. I thought about the moments he must have felt alone, battling his fears and uncertainties without the anchor of my faith. How many times had he second-guessed himself because the person closest to him didn't believe? How much stronger might he have been if I'd stood beside him instead of standing in the way? The weight of regret settled heavily on my chest. I had underestimated the power of words, the quiet erosion that comes from persistent doubt. I had mocked his dreams, and in doing so, I had pushed him to pursue them alone. Yet, amidst the ache, there was a flicker of understanding, a recognition that my cynicism was born not from lack of love but from fear. Fear of change, fear of losing him, fear of the unknown. I also saw how my own insecurities had blinded me to the importance of supporting someone's aspirations, no matter how uncertain the path. I had confused practicality with pessimism, and in that confusion, I had lost sight of what truly mattered. Sitting there, watching the rain blur the world outside, I made a silent promise to myself, to carry this lesson forward, to be kinder, more supportive, and more open to the dreams of those I care about. But the road to forgiveness, both from Liam and myself, felt long and uncertain. I knew that understanding alone couldn't undo the past, nor could it bridge the distance that had grown between us. Still, this reflection was a start, a necessary step toward healing and growth. I held on to the hope that someday, the wounds might soften, and the trust might be rebuilt. For now, I was left with the quiet realization that sometimes, regret is the price we pay for not believing when it mattered most. And that the true tragedy lies not in failure itself, but in the moments we fail to stand by those we love when their dreams take flight. The decision to reach out to Liam was not made lightly. Weeks had passed since my last hesitant attempts, filled with silence and half-answered messages. Each day, the weight of regret pressed harder, until finally, I typed the words that had been stuck in my throat for months: "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" The reply was cautious but open: "Okay. When?" We agreed to meet at a small, quiet cafe, a place neutral and unassuming, far from the worlds we'd once shared and the crowds that had witnessed our unraveling. I arrived early, nerves fluttering like trapped birds in my chest. When Liam walked in, his presence was both familiar and distant, the lines of his face sharper, his gaze steady but guarded. We sat across from each other, the space between us filled with memories and unsaid apologies. I reached for my coffee, fingers trembling slightly. "I want to start by saying I'm sorry," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "I was wrong to mock your dreams. I didn't realize how much my words could hurt you." Liam looked down, then back up, his eyes searching mine. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know." There was a pause, heavy with everything we hadn't said. "I've thought a lot about why I reacted the way I did," he began slowly. "Your doubts didn't just shake my confidence, they made me question my worth. If the person I loved couldn't believe in me, how could I believe in myself?" His honesty struck me deeply. I had never intended to wound him so profoundly, yet my skepticism had done exactly that. "I understand," I replied. "I was scared, I think. Scared of losing you if your dreams took you somewhere I couldn't follow." He nodded, a flicker of sadness crossing his face. "Maybe that fear kept us apart more than anything else." We talked then, not just about the past, but about who we were now. Liam shared the challenges he'd faced building his business, the moments of doubt and the victories that followed. I listened, humbled by the strength he'd shown. I shared my regrets, my loneliness, and the emptiness I'd felt watching him grow without me. It was a conversation filled with pauses, with the weight of years compressed into hours. "I want to believe in you," I said finally. "But I know that trust isn't something you can just give back when it's broken." Liam smiled faintly. "No, it takes time. And I'm not sure where we go from here. But I'm willing to try." The hope in his voice was tentative, fragile, but real. In the days that followed, I reached out more, texts filled with encouragement, small check-ins, and invitations to meet. Liam responded with caution, sometimes warmth, sometimes distance. The dance between us was delicate, a careful negotiation of feelings and boundaries. Friends noticed the change. Sarah warned me gently, "He's trying, but he's also protecting himself. Don't rush it." I nodded, knowing she was right. Healing couldn't be hurried. One night, after a quiet phone call where laughter briefly replaced hesitation, Liam said softly, "I'm still figuring things out. I'm moving forward, and sometimes that means walking alone." His words lingered, a reminder that the journey ahead was his own to navigate. I sat alone afterward, grappling with the bittersweet truth that love sometimes means letting go, respecting the space someone needs to grow. Our fragile attempts at reconciliation were like walking a tightrope, balancing hope with caution, forgiveness with self-preservation. I wanted to hold on to the possibility of us, but I knew now that Liam's path was his to choose, and my role had changed. The distance between us remained, a quiet barrier neither of us was yet ready to cross fully. And so, I learned to live with the tension, between what was lost and what might still be, between regret and the fragile hope of healing. The weeks after our tentative reunion were a strange limbo, a place neither of us wanted to be but couldn't avoid. I reached out often, my messages filled with hope and apologies, but the responses I received were measured, distant. Liam was cautious, protective of the ground he had reclaimed for himself. One afternoon, I sat in a cafe, phone in hand, staring at a message from him, "I'm grateful for your support, Emma. But I need to keep moving forward on my own." The words hit me like a cold wind. It wasn't anger or bitterness in his tone, just a quiet resolve. He needed space, independence, a chance to build the life he dreamed of without the shadows of our past lingering between us. I wanted to argue, to convince him that we could rebuild together. But deep down, I knew I couldn't ask him to pause his journey for my sake. Sometimes growth demands solitude. Friends noticed the shift in me. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm when she said, "Emma, sometimes letting go is the kindest thing you can do, for both of you." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Accepting that Liam's path no longer included me as I once hoped was one of the hardest lessons I've faced. Our interactions became fewer, more formal. The warmth that once defined us was replaced by polite distance. I found myself clinging to memories, to the fragments of what we had been, while Liam forged ahead, building a future that didn't need me. There were moments when I thought I saw glimpses of the old Liam, the way his eyes lit up when sharing a new idea, the laughter that still echoed in my mind. But those moments were fleeting, overshadowed by the growing space between us. I tried to imagine what his life was like now, early mornings in the studio, meetings with clients, late nights fueled by passion and purpose. A life where I was no longer the center, no longer the confidant. It was a bitter realization, but also a necessary one. Sometimes love isn't enough to bridge the gaps created by hurt and misunderstanding. I began to focus on myself, on healing the wounds left by our fractured relationship. I took long walks, journaled my feelings, and slowly rebuilt my own dreams that had been sidelined for too long. The pain of losing Liam in that way was sharp, but beneath it was a quiet resilience, a determination to grow beyond regret. One evening, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the rain. I thought about the journey Liam had taken, the strength it must have required to move forward without me. And I thought about my own path, a new chapter, shaped by lessons learned and the hope that, someday, I might find peace with the choices we both made. The distance between us remained, a silent testament to what was lost and what could never be reclaimed. But in accepting that, I found a fragile kind of freedom, the freedom to let go, to move forward, and to embrace the uncertain promise of tomorrow. The evening settled around me like a familiar cloak, thick with quiet and the weight of solitude. The apartment felt too large, too empty, each corner a reminder of the life Liam and I once shared, now reduced to echoes and shadows. I sat on the windowsill, watching the city lights flicker through the rain-streaked glass, my thoughts tangled in the web of all that had been lost. Regret was a constant companion these days, a dull ache beneath the surface of every waking moment. I replayed the memories, the laughter, the dreams, the unspoken hopes, and the moments when I had scoffed at his ambitions, dismissed his passion as folly. Those were the times that haunted me most, the times when my cynicism had carved a gulf between us too wide to bridge. I had made fun of his dreams, not realizing the cost until he was already out of reach. He pursued them without me, fueled by a resilience I had failed to nurture, and in doing so, he became someone I barely recognized. Success had crowned him, but it was a crown I could no longer share. The ache in my chest was not just for what I lost, but for what I had never truly understood, the power of belief, the necessity of support, the fragile wings that dreams need to take flight. I had been the weight that clipped those wings, the voice that echoed doubt instead of encouragement. I thought about the moments when I had laughed at his plans, the sarcastic comments that now felt like daggers. How many times had his confidence faltered because the person closest to him refused to stand beside him? How many opportunities slipped away in the silence that followed my disbelief? Yet, beneath the regret was a flicker of acceptance. I knew that some lessons come too late, that some bridges burn before we can cross them. The price of my cynicism was high, but it was mine to bear. I reached for my journal, the pages worn from countless nights of reflection, and wrote. I underestimated the value of dreams pursued with courage. I failed to see that belief is not just a gift, it is a lifeline. And in mocking his dreams, I lost the man who dared to chase them. The rain outside softened to a gentle patter, a lullaby for the restless heart. I closed my eyes and let the tears fall freely, mourning not just the relationship that ended, but the person I had been, the skeptic who feared change more than she feared loss. In the stillness, I found a fragile peace. The regret would linger, a bittersweet reminder of what might have been, but it would no longer consume me. I would carry it as a lesson, a quiet caution to cherish and support the dreams of those I love. As the city lights blurred into the night, I understood that sometimes the greatest act of love is to let go, to watch from afar as dreams are pursued, even if it means standing alone. And in that solitude, I began to find myself again. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.